On September 29th, Vladimir Putin signed another mobilization decree, this time summoning 134,000 men between 18 and 30 years old. The order marked the largest conscription wave in nearly a decade, a desperate attempt to refill the ranks of an army that has already lost more than 1 million men since the war began. From October 1st onward, young Russians who were never part of the reserves would be forced to report for duty. Yet almost no one wants to go. Across Moscow, St. Petersburg, and provincial towns alike, the phrase mobilization notice has become synonymous with fear. What the Kremlin calls military service, many Russians now call a death sentence. Reports from Reuters and the BBC in October 2025 describe police vans waiting outside metro stations and apartment blocks, abducting men at random to meet quotas. Videos on Telegram show officers bursting into bars and dormitories, dragging away students as others watch in silence. The panic is palpable. Young men are hiding in basements, remote villages, or fleeing abroad to Kazakhstan, Armenia, or even Mongolia, joining an exodus unseen since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Kremlin, meanwhile, insists everything is routine. But the truth is painfully obvious: Russia's manpower crisis has reached breaking point. According to British intelligence assessments, entire Russian brigades on the Donetsk and Kursk fronts are operating at barely half strength. The Ukrainian counteroffensives in Pokrovsk and Svatove have inflicted enormous losses, and replacements are nearly impossible to find. As a result, Moscow's latest draft has turned into a nationwide manhunt. Yet the social divide within Russia has never been clearer. While men in Moscow and St. Petersburg find ways to dodge the draft through bribery connections or fake medical exemptions, the poorer regions, Buryatia, Dagestan, and Tuva, are being stripped bare. In Dagestan alone, regional NGOs report mobilization rates per capita 5 times higher than in Moscow. Thousands of men from minority ethnic backgrounds have already been killed or wounded. This is not just a military draft. It's a class war disguised as patriotism. The Kremlin's silence over this injustice is deafening. In Buryatia, mothers cry at bus stations as their sons are herded into trucks bound for unknown battlefields. In Chelyabinsk, a local teacher told The Guardian that the poorest families send the most sons. These voices rarely make it to Russian state television, where officials repeat that Russia defends itself against the West. But on Telegram, the truth is unfiltered. Videos of wives shouting at recruitment officers, of mothers blocking buses, have become symbols of resistance. Even Russia's promise of money, hefty bonuses, and inflated salaries no longer tempts recruits. The ruble's collapse and rampant inflation have made such offers meaningless. Besides, most men know they may never live long enough to collect them. Reports from independent Russian media outlets like Meduza reveal that promised payments often vanish into bureaucratic black holes or are stolen by corrupt officers. As the war drags into its 4th year, the Kremlin's social contract with its people has disintegrated. Once military service was portrayed as honor, now it's humiliation. Soldiers return home broken, jobless, and shunned. The few survivors talk openly about frostbite, starvation, and commanders who vanished mid-battle. This forced mobilization isn't about defending the homeland, it's about survival for the regime. Putin's government knows that losing manpower means losing control. But every man taken off the street deepens the resentment at home. Russia's peripheries now whisper the unthinkable. Why should we die for Moscow's mistakes? It's a question that echoes through every conscription office, every train platform, every terrified household watching the news. For the first time, ordinary Russians aren't just questioning the war, they're questioning the very system that demands their sons' lives. And in a nation built on fear, that realization could be the beginning of something far more dangerous: than any battlefield defeat. As Russia's newest wave of conscripts trudges toward the front, they step into a nightmare that has long since consumed the army's morale, hunger disease, and corruption. Reports from soldiers' families and leaked videos on Telegram paint a grotesque picture of what life looks like in Putin's so-called Second Army of the world. By 2025, the Kremlin's once boasted logistics network has completely unraveled. Even Defense News and Reuters confirm what many feared since 2022. Russian soldiers are starving, not because Ukraine blocks their supplies, but because their own system devours them before they ever arrive. In frontline sectors like Donetsk, Luhansk, and the frozen trenches near Kursk, rations often vanish midway through transport. Truck convoys filled with food and equipment are routinely lost, a euphemism for theft. Corrupt officers sell military provisions on the black market, swapping fuel and canned meat for cash cigarettes or contraband. When rations do make it through, they are often spoiled beyond recognition: moldy bread, expired tins, sometimes food stamped with production dates from the 1990s. Soldiers boil water with rusty nails just to kill the taste. The humanitarian disaster is undeniable. Ukrainian drones have repeatedly filmed Russian troops rummaging through destroyed villages, scavenging for anything edible. In one intercepted call, verified by Ukrainian intelligence, a Russian soldier admitted, "We've eaten all the dogs. Now we're catching rats." A shocking 2025 BBC investigation confirmed that even in newly mobilized units, recruits receive only a fraction of their daily caloric requirement, sometimes less than 100-200 calories. That's starvation level for men expected to fight March and survive in freezing conditions. But starvation is only one face of Russia's supply collapse. Winter uniforms disintegrate within days. Helmets crack. Bulletproof vests are stuffed with cardboard instead of Kevlar, a scandal first uncovered by Novaya Gazeta, and later verified by satellite-linked imagery showing massive shortages in logistics depots. In 2025, an internal leak from the Russian Ministry of Defense revealed that more than 60% of frontline gear purchased during the 2022-2024 period was either defective or entirely missing. Soldiers have been forced to crowdsource their own protection, buying boots, thermal wear, and even body armor on marketplaces like Avito or from illegal suppliers in Kazakhstan. The absurdity of it all becomes clearer when one looks at the economics. A proper grade 5 bulletproof vest once cost 7,000 rubles before the war. Now it can exceed 150,000, roughly half a conscript's annual salary. For many families, outfitting a son for war means selling their car or taking loans they can never repay. This economic cruelty underlines the social perspective of the war. The poor sacrifice their savings and sons, while the wealthy in Moscow barely notice the conflict except on television. Yet it is not just corruption, it's institutional decay. The Defense Ministry's vast procurement system is a labyrinth of nepotism. Contractors overcharge the government by hundreds of millions, producing fake invoices and falsified testing certificates. According to a 2025 investigation by the Insider, one Moscow-based supplier of army food packs was found to have delivered rations that contain nothing more than bags of flour and dead insects. The Ministry of Defense quietly canceled the contract, but not before several battalions had already eaten the contaminated supplies. And while logistics disintegrate, morale collapses. Telegram is flooded with pleas from desperate soldiers: "Send food. We haven't eaten in 3 days, they left us here to die." Some of these messages are deleted minutes later, likely after military censors intervene. But the damage is done. The Russian public sees the truth. Even pro-war bloggers, once loyal to the Kremlin, now accuse the generals of starving our men into the ground. In this environment, survival becomes a lottery. Soldiers trade ammunition for bread, cigarettes for soap, and sometimes even weapons for a warm jacket. This kind of desperation destroys discipline faster than any enemy artillery. A starving soldier cannot fight for ideology, he fights for a meal. The Kremlin's answer: silence. Instead of confronting the rot, officials threaten anyone who complains. But silence doesn't feed an army. Each empty ration box, each unpaid soldier, each corpse in a frozen trench, all of it chips away at the illusion of Russian might. By 2025, the Russian army isn't fighting a war against Ukraine anymore. It's fighting a war against its own hunger, its own incompetence, and its own betrayal. And in that war, no one wins. If starvation and corruption are killing Russian soldiers from the outside, hazing and abuse are destroying them from within. Long before the invasion of Ukraine, the Russian army was infamous for Dedovshchina, a brutal culture of bullying that turned every new conscript into prey. Nearly 2 decades later, that tradition has metastasized into something even darker. In 2025, as thousands of terrified young men are dragged into service, the army's violence against its own recruits has reached its most horrifying form. Official Russian figures don't tell the story, but leaked documents and human rights reports do. According to Meduza and Novaya Gazeta Europe, suicides among new conscripts have risen by more than 40% since 2022. The NGO Soldiers' Mothers of Russia, one of the last remaining watchdogs tolerated by the Kremlin, says that for every soldier killed in combat, nearly one more dies from suicide beatings or neglect. This is not a statistical error, it's a moral collapse. The tragedy of Private Artyom Pakotin still haunts many Russians. Punished for smoking in the barracks, he was beaten, humiliated, and forced to have the slur rooster Russian prison slang for sexual victim carved into his forehead. 2 weeks later, he shot himself during a training exercise in Sverdlovsk. His final message to his mother still circulates online, a chilling cry for help. They break us until we break ourselves. This cruelty is no accident. It is structural, a tool to condition obedience. Commanders turn a blind eye to beatings because violence keeps recruits compliant. In units made up of convicts from penal colonies and inexperienced 19-year-olds from remote republics, brutality becomes the only chain of command. Videos leaked in early 2025 from a unit in Belgorod show recruits kneeling in snow, forced to sing patriotic anthems as officers strike them with rifle butts. The men laugh not because it's funny, but because the alternative is to cry. From the social perspective, this pattern mirrors the inequality inside Russia itself. Recruits from Buryatia, Dagestan, and Tuva are often subjected to the worst abuse. Many arrive barely speaking Russian, unfamiliar with military slang, and are mocked as tribals or meat. In contrast, conscripts from major cities often serve in non-combat roles, or are quickly reassigned through family connections. It's colonial warfare turned inward, says analyst Pavel Luzin in an interview with The Guardian. Moscow treats its own periphery the way empires once treated colonies: expendable, voiceless, invisible. Yet cracks in this system are beginning to appear. The Soldiers' Mothers movement, once dismissed as fringe, is becoming a moral force the Kremlin cannot ignore. Through encrypted telegram channels, mothers exchange testimonies, coordinate letters, and share the names of missing sons. Their language is not political, it's maternal. That's what makes it dangerous. These women do not chant anti-war slogans. They ask, "Where is my son, and why hasn't he come home?" Such questions erode the Kremlin's control more effectively than any protest banner. This is the political perspective soft pressure that breaks through censorship. Even under Trump's administration, where Washington's diplomatic posture toward Moscow is colder but less confrontational, Western intelligence quietly monitors this domestic dissent. As DW reported in September 2025, these women-led movements have grown into networks spanning over 40 Russian regions, linking small towns through Telegram, WhatsApp, and V-Contact. Every story of a missing son is another blow to the state's myth of heroic victory. And then comes the demographic cost, the scars that will last far beyond the war. Russia is losing an entire generation of young men, not only to death but to trauma. Psychiatric wards in regional hospitals are overflowing with veterans suffering from PTSD. The labor force is shrinking, the birth rate collapsing. Economists at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow estimate that by 2030, Russia's working-age male population will drop by nearly 4 million, a deficit that no propaganda can mask. Inside this cycle of hazing and despair, the Kremlin's greatest threat isn't NATO or Ukraine. It's its own soldiers realizing that the enemy might be wearing the same uniform. For every man beaten into submission, another quietly deserts. For every life destroyed by commanders, another mother finds her voice online. And in a country built on fear, even whispers can become a storm. For Russia's soldiers, survival doesn't depend solely on courage. It depends on whether their weapons actually work. And in today's Russian military, that's no longer guaranteed. The once feared arsenal that symbolized Moscow's power is now crumbling under the weight of decades of corruption, incompetence, and deception. Soldiers on the front lines are discovering that their rifles jam their artillery misfires and their bombs don't explode. The enemy isn't only across the trenches, it's the very system that armed them. In 2025, BBC News and Defense Express published reports detailing the widespread use of fake munitions shells and rockets stuffed with plaster or wood chips, designed to look real but incapable of detonating. These duds, the product of fraudulent defense contracts, have appeared in multiple battle zones. Ukrainian forces in Pokrovsk recovered unexploded Russian ordnance filled with concrete dust. According to Western intelligence, these were not isolated incidents, but part of a massive fraud network inside Russia's Ministry of Defense. The rot runs deep. When Putin's generals ordered emergency procurement in late 2023 to replenish depleted stocks, corrupt suppliers saw an opportunity. Instead of producing genuine high-explosive shells, several factories, including one near Nizhny Novgorod, delivered counterfeit rounds to storage depots. The generals signed off on them anyway for a price. The result, thousands of Russian artillery crews now fire blanks unaware until it's too late. But small arms are no better. Recruits complain that the AK-74 rifles they're issued are rusted, missing springs, or bent from age. In one widely shared Telegram clip from 2024, a commander passes out rifles still sealed in plastic dating back to 1979. Half of them don't shoot, the soldier filming whispers. We're supposed to storm fortified lines with this. Similar footage analyzed by Bellingcat shows storage depots packed with obsolete ammunition and tanks stripped for parts. The state's obsession with illusion projecting power while hiding decay has turned the Russian army into a museum of lies. Officially, Moscow claims to have modernized its forces with the new T-90M and T-14 Armata tanks. But according to Military Watch magazine, fewer than 24 armatas are operational, and many are used only for propaganda footage. The majority of tanks deployed in 2025 are old Soviet T-62s pulled from scrapyards, barely functional, often destroyed within days. In one viral drone video verified by Reuters, Ukrainian operators laugh as a Russian T-62 bursts into flames after being hit in the engine by debris, not a missile. At the same time, Russia's own defense industry is collapsing under sanctions. With Trump in the White House and U.S. allies tightening export controls, Moscow can no longer import key components like microchips and precision bearings. As a result, even newly produced missiles have catastrophic failure rates. Defense News recently cited Western intelligence indicating that nearly one-third of Russia's cruise missiles launched in 2025 failed mid-flight, crashing inside Russian territory. These aren't weapons of deterrence, they're symbols of dysfunction. For the soldiers, this dysfunction is deadly. In Kursk and Belgorod, infantry units were ordered to attack fortified Ukrainian positions, armed only with rifles and hand grenades, because their mortars had no shells left. Survivors described the assaults as suicide missions. Others speak of live grenades that fail to detonate or worse, explode prematurely due to faulty fuses. You can die from your own grenade before the enemy even sees you, one conscript told Novaya Gazeta Europe from a hospital bed. This technological collapse connects directly to Russia's demographic and political decay. Engineers, technicians, and scientists, the intellectual core of the defense sector, are fleeing the country in record numbers. Since 2022, more than 1 million skilled professionals have left Russia, many to Turkey and the EU. The result is a hollowed-out industrial base, unable to repair or innovate. The brain drain that Putin once dismissed as temporary migration has become permanent. Meanwhile, on the political front, frustration is spreading even among loyal military bloggers who once praised the special operation. Channels like Rybar and Grey Zone, once pro-Kremlin, now openly mock the Ministry of Defense for feeding the front with garbage. Such public dissent, though cautious, signals fractures within the propaganda machine itself. Even loyalists can no longer deny what the soldiers already know: Russia's arsenal is a lie built on rust. Every defective bullet, every jammed rifle, every false promise widens the gap between the Kremlin's image and its reality. What began as a war of aggression has turned into a war of exposure, a global stage where Russia's once feared power is revealed as hollow. The longer it fights, the clearer the truth becomes. The empire isn't running out of weapons. It's running out of lies. Russia's military failure didn't begin on the battlefield. It began in the boardrooms, offices, and banquet halls, where generals and defense contractors feasted on the money meant to arm and feed soldiers. Behind the collapsing front lines lies a deeper rot, one that no missile or drone can destroy: corruption. It's not just a side effect of war. It is the war and internal conflict between greed and survival that's slowly consuming Russia from within. Investigations by Reuters and The Insider in 2025 expose how the Ministry of Defense became one of the most corrupt institutions in the country. Senior officials diverted billions of rubles through fake procurement deals, shell companies, and ghost factories. In one infamous case, General Sergei Shoigu's department approved contracts for the repair of 2,000 armored vehicles. Not one was ever serviced. Instead, warehouse managers signed fake paperwork, pocketed the money, and the vehicles were left to rust in depots. When the war began, those same tanks were shipped to the front, where they broke down before firing a single shot. This corruption stretches far beyond equipment. Even death has a price. According to BBC News, regional officials in the Urals and Siberia demanded kickbacks from families seeking compensation for fallen soldiers. The payments meant to support widows and children were slashed by administrative deductions. Local officers simply pocketed the difference. In some villages, officials forged death certificates to claim money for soldiers who never existed. For the Kremlin, such theft is more dangerous than Western sanctions. The economy survives on oil. The military survives on lies. Putin's system rewards loyalty, not competence, ensuring that thieves thrive while professionals flee. Every ruble stolen from the defense budget translates into fewer bullets, fewer helmets, and fewer lives saved. Yet Putin cannot punish the system he built it. By 2025, the situation has become a perfect storm of decay. The Russian Court of Audit quietly reported that nearly 40% of the defense budget was untraceable. That's more than 130 billion US dollars gone without explanation. Analysts at Defense News describe this as the largest peacetime embezzlement in modern military history. The result is catastrophic inefficiency, broken supply lines, empty fuel depots, and ghost battalions listed as active. From the social perspective, this corruption mirrors the inequality tearing Russia apart. While oligarchs purchase villas in Dubai and yachts in the Mediterranean, soldiers' families in Dagestan and Buryatia rely on donations from local charities to buy winter clothes. In Moscow, propaganda networks call them heroes. In reality, they're collateral. The Kremlin's silence toward their suffering reflects an empire feeding on its poorest subjects. "It's not Ukraine killing our sons," said one mother from Makhachkala in a Telegram interview. "It's Moscow." The political perspective is equally damning. Small anti-corruption protests are spreading disguised as memorials or vigils. In April 2025, a group of mothers in Irkutsk placed 134 pairs of boots outside a recruitment office, one for every man drafted that month. Police removed them within minutes, but the photo went viral across Telegram. "They can delete posts," one activist wrote, "but not grief." This is the new battlefield of dissent, quiet, female-led, and unstoppable. Even the Kremlin's allies admit the rot is eating the system alive. The Wagner Group mutinies of 2023 may have been crushed, but the resentment they exposed still festers. Former mercenaries returning from the front now speak openly about generals selling intelligence officers, trading weapons for cash and fuel meant for tanks being sold to private companies. In the words of a former Storm Z fighter interviewed by Novaya Gazeta Europe, "We weren't fighting Ukraine, we were fighting our own officers for food." Meanwhile, the demographic perspective reveals how corruption cripples the nation's future. Young professionals, engineers, IT workers, medics are leaving en masse. Since 2022, over 1.3 million Russians have fled the country, creating a brain drain unseen since the 1990s. With Trump's re-election and renewed Western sanctions, Russia's economic isolation has deepened. The industries that could have rebuilt the nation, energy, aviation, technology, now suffer critical labor shortages. The demographic wounds inflicted by corruption may take decades to heal, if they heal at all. What remains is a state where loyalty outweighs ability, where lies replace logistics, and where generals grow fat while soldiers freeze. In such a system, defeat isn't just probable, it's inevitable. The West doesn't need to destroy Russia's military. Russia is already doing it from the inside. And in this decay lies a final irony: the Kremlin still insists it's fighting to protect the motherland. Yet the greatest threat to that motherland doesn't come from foreign armies. It comes from its own sons of privilege feeding on the very country they claim to defend. By the fall of 2025, a quiet rebellion is taking root across Russia, not with guns or slogans, but with silence, defiance, and flight. The Kremlin's grip on its population still looks ironclad from the outside, yet inside the country, resistance is spreading like cracks in a frozen lake. Millions are choosing to disappear rather than die, turning evasion into the most powerful act of rebellion in Putin's Russia. The latest mobilization decree triggered a new exodus. In just 3 weeks, more than 400,000 Russians fled through land borders into Georgia, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Mongolia, according to Al Jazeera and DW. Airports in Yerevan and Tbilisi overflow with exhausted families carrying only backpacks and silence. Trains to Central Asia are booked solid for months. For these men, flight is freedom. For the Kremlin, it's humiliation. Each man who escapes is another reminder that loyalty can no longer be forced. Meanwhile, those left behind are rebelling in other ways. Across Siberia and the Caucasus, local governments struggle to enforce Moscow's draft orders. Reports from Reuters and Meduza reveal that entire village administrations in Dagestan and Buryatia are falsifying records to protect their young men. Some doctors issue fake diagnoses of asthma or epilepsy. Others simply lose medical files. In Yakutia, priests quietly bless men before they vanish into the taiga, a new underground railroad leading away from war. These acts of disobedience reveal a society fractured by injustice. The social perspective is undeniable. The poor, the rural, and the ethnic minorities still bear the burden. Mobilization rates in Buryatia are 6 times higher than in Moscow. Yet the capital's cafes remain full, and its boulevards untouched by grief. In these regions, entire generations of men are gone dead, crippled, or hiding. The demographic imbalance is stark. Women outnumber men by nearly 20% in some districts, creating what Russian sociologists grimly call the widows' republics. The Kremlin's silence about this loss speaks volumes. The political perspective shows how resistance now evolves in digital shadows. Telegram channels with names like Mothers Against Mobilization and Voices of the Missing Coordinate protests leak troop casualty lists and warn families of upcoming raids. These groups operate beneath Russia's censorship radar, linked by encrypted chats and moral conviction. The faces of this rebellion are not soldiers or politicians. They are women holding photos of sons who never came home. The state cannot imprison them all. Every mother's voice becomes an indictment of the regime. And yet, the Kremlin tightens control. A new digital draft law introduced in April 2025 binds every male citizen to an online registry. Once a summons is issued, the individual is automatically banned from leaving Russia, selling property, obtaining loans, or renewing a driver's license. Officials call it modernization. Russians call it digital slavery. But repression only fuels resistance. In the words of one activist from Nizhny Novgorod, quoted by The Guardian, "If they close every door, we'll dig tunnels." The demographic perspective reveals an even deeper crisis: the erosion of Russia's future. Every month, thousands of young men vanish abroad, not deserters, but the country's most capable generation. IT engineers, medics, teachers, linguists, the minds that could have rebuilt the nation, are gone. The Federal Statistics Service quietly admitted in mid-2025 that births have fallen to the lowest level since World War II. Russia isn't just losing soldiers, it's losing the next 20 years of its future. Economists warn of a double bleeding: the death of youth on the front lines and the flight of intellect from the cities. Factories stand idle, hospitals understaffed, schools understaffed. Even state television has begun broadcasting recruitment ads for teachers and doctors, offering high salaries that no one believes will be paid. The war has hollowed the country, not only militarily, but morally. And yet the most remarkable story isn't collapse. It's awakening. For the first time in 2 decades, Russians are questioning the system itself. The word mobilization has lost its patriotic shine and now means something closer to punishment. Even among loyalists, whispers of exhaustion spread. When will this end? Across the vastness of Russia, the rebellion takes many forms: a deleted telegram post, a fake medical note, a midnight escape over the border, a mother refusing to stay silent. This quiet defiance is the one war Putin cannot win. Because the moment Russians stop fearing him, the regime begins to die. As 2025 draws to a close, one question lingers over the ruins of a nation at war with itself. Can a country survive when its greatest enemy is its own government? The war that began as an invasion of Ukraine has become an implosion of Russia itself. Behind the Kremlin's grand speeches and televised victories lies a nation collapsing under hunger, corruption, and fear. From Moscow's luxury towers to Buryatia's frozen villages, the divide has never been starker. The poor die in trenches, the rich dine in comfort. Politically, cracks in control are widening as mothers, wives, and local officials challenge state propaganda with moral truth. Each act of resistance, every leaked message, every missing soldier's name chips away at the Kremlin's illusion of unity. Demographically, the damage is irreversible. Millions of young men are gone, either dead or gone abroad. Factories and classrooms are empty, and the future bleeds away one family at a time. Donald Trump's presidency has reshaped the geopolitical landscape, but cannot mask what the world already sees: a Russia at war not with NATO or Ukraine, but with itself. Unless Moscow confronts the rot within the corruption, inequality, and silence that feed this war, its downfall will not come from foreign armies. It will come from the quiet defiance of its own people.